I'm not there to conduct an auction for you and just get any price. I'm there to get the best price in the market from the buyers who are at the auction.
Hi guys, welcome back to Property Chat with Lachy and Matt. We're still here with Damien, Cooley and obviously Lachlan. Damien, we wanted to ask you a couple of questions on what your top tips would be for buyers and sellers at auction.
Great question to ask, and it's one that I often get asked, particularly from a buyer's point of view, is when we're going out to an auction on Saturday, what are your top tips for me as a buyer, and how can I implement the right bidding strategy? And the first thing I always say to people is that like every auction is different, and you need to really like sum up the auction, sum up how many people are registered, sum up what's the agent been guiding you on price, what are you prepared to pay for the property, and work out a bit of a strategy in your own mind as to how you're going to play it. And the first thing that I'll also say is that like strategy can actually go out the window as soon as the auction opens. So I think it's really important to understand like what you are prepared to pay. I don't often advocate that people actually set themselves a limit. And I know that might sound a bit crazy because at the end of the day, there is an affordability point that you do need to consider as to what you're prepared to pay for the property. But I think property is incredibly hard to value. And saying that you're going to go to an auction and your budget is $640,000, like why is it 640 and not 645? Like why is it 645 and it's not 660? Yeah, or why is it 660 and it shouldn't be 580? Like how are you arriving at that price? How do you arrive at that valuation? And I often speak to people about the fact that, you know, one of the very first investment properties that myself and my wife Peppy we bought was a terrace in Erskineville, and that property, we bought that property for $585,000. And I remember having an argument with Peppy about the fact that, you know, I wanted the budget to be 600. Peppy wanted the budget to be 590. And long story short is we ended up buying it for 585. But that property is now worth, you know, 1.4 million. And I think to myself, how foolish would we have been to miss out on that for not going to 595 or not going to 600? Hindsight's a wonderful thing. So when people talk about setting themselves a limit, I think you should consider that limit based on the investment and based on the property, and ask yourself more around, by buying this property, how is this going to change my life? Am I actually going to be a happier person by living in this family home? Is this going to be the right decision for my family? And if the answer to that is yes, by spending an extra $5,000 or $10,000, if you can afford it, I think is absolutely the right decision. If the property doesn't tick all the boxes and you're happy to let it go, then I can understand a buyer digging their heels in a bit more. So be a bit flexible with where you are positioning yourself on price. I think it's really important to watch your competition. I think one of the biggest mistakes that buyers make is that they don't watch the bidders that they're bidding against. And you can learn a lot from body language. I mean, as an auctioneer, we read buyers' body language.
Yeah.
We feed off the body language that we're getting from buyers. And that's because we say and do things that are purely working straight against that body language that we're reading from those buyers. So from a buyer's point of view, why wouldn't a buyer watch the other buyer? If you can see that other buyer is starting to weaken by little telltale signs, for example, two buyers might look at each other and as if to say, that's a telltale sign like, we've reached the limit. Do you think we should go again? Right. Now, when a buyer does that, if you're bidding against them, that's the perfect time that the moment they bid to hit them straight back with a bid. And it doesn't need to be a $5,000 or $10,000 bid. It can be $1,000. But the fact that you do it so quickly, it's almost like a bit of a dagger in the chest for them. So, oh no, they really want it. And I've had a lot of people walk away from auctions that literally, if they just went that 1,000 more or that 5,000 more, they probably would have secured the property. But they were outbid and outsmarted by their competition. And
I think that's something we see as auctioneers. When we see that happen, you almost want to walk over to that buyer and sort of, you know, tap them on the shoulder, shake them and go, you realise that you have got them on the ropes right now. And they don't realise it because, as you say, they're not watching the same body language that we are.
Yep. People go into auctions, I think, also, Matt, with too much strategy. A lot of people sit back and they don't bid. I actually think that's one of the worst things you can do. And I don't say that because I'm an auctioneer and I want people to place the first bid. I actually think that a lot of buyers underestimate the fact that a real estate agent is a human being an auctioneer is a human being, and agents and auctioneers actually look favourably upon those people that bid and those people that compete. In fact, there is nothing more infuriating than a buyer not bidding out of strategy or out of spite because they're just going to have their hands in their pocket and not do anything. A buyer is in a better negotiation position, I believe, with an agent because the agent actually likes them more and an auctioneer likes them more when they actually bid and they compete. So one of my big pieces of advice to buyers is don't be afraid to get involved. Don't be afraid to go up to the auctioneer before the auction starts. Shake their hand. Introduce yourself to the auctioneer. The auctioneer is a human being also. You can't help but like someone if they come up and say hello to you, shake your hand, and give you a bit of an understanding of who you are as a buyer and what it means to you to buy the property. We're humans. We're emotional people. So is the buyer, incidentally. So from an auctioneer and agent's point of view, we do the right thing by the buyer. Buying a property should be a really joyful experience in your life, particularly when you're buying a family home or your first home. I think that agents and auctioneers have a responsibility to make it a joyful experience for the purchaser and a fun experience, but recognise that we're there to do a job and we're there to get the best price for the owner. But from a buyer's point of view, you can also do that in a very respectful way to the agent, and the agent can do it in a respectful way to you as a buyer.
And you probably see a lot of those buyers coming back to the same auctions every single week. The one who's played the real hardball strategy, they're still shopping, they're still out there trying to come and bid and run their strategy without asking for any advice. And they're usually the ones from an agent's point of view that you have the most trouble with throughout the campaign. You struggle to get buyer feedback to then help set the reserve, which, from a buyer's point of view, the best thing you can do is give good educated feedback, because that allows us to go and speak with our vendor and say, look, this is where the market would like to see the reserve in order to have a good auction.
And I think buyers get nervous that they feel like, if I tell Matt what I'm going to pay for this property, he's going to use that against me at the auction, or he's going to use that against me in the negotiation. But I've got a real big news flash for everyone, okay? But a buyer has to make a bid in order to buy a property, okay? So if you don't bid, guess what? You can't buy the property. And I know that might sound a bit crazy, but from a buyer's point of view, I can tell you that I might think it's worth $500,000, but I don't have to bid $500,000 at the auction if I don't want to. And the owner might say they want $500,000, but guess what? If I don't pay $500,000 and they don't have to sell it to me. So you're in this scenario where it's actually okay to tell an agent where you see value. It's actually okay to do that. And from an owner's point of view, it's okay for the owner to tell the agent what they think the property's worth. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the owner thinks it's worth, and it doesn't matter so much what the agent also thinks it's worth. It does matter what the buyer thinks it's worth, because they're the one that has to write the check and they're the one that has to buy the property. And the vendor is always in control, because they set the reserve price on auction day and they don't have to sell it if they don't want to take the price, and the buyer doesn't have to pay the price if they don't want to pay the price. Yeah. The agent's role as the marketing agent is to bring the buyer and the seller together. Yeah. That's it.
I think some of the key questions that I get as well from sellers, it sometimes can be around whether they should be selling prior, whether they should be running a 4 or 6 week auction campaign. I'd love you to touch on some of those points as to whether you think that selling prior is something that you'd consider if you were giving that advice.
Yeah, okay. So let's look at that, right? And again, every auction is different. I think where a lot of agents go wrong is that they make the decision to sell prior the moment the property is listed. They're not making the decision to sell prior based on whether they should or shouldn't be selling prior. In their own minds, they're already selling prior. And I won't name names, but there are some agents that sell, anywhere above 70% or 80% or some 90% of their properties sell prior to auction. Is that the right thing for the property? It may well be. But every auction campaign really is different. Some properties are some campaigns, I should say, are more suited to selling before the auction, and some campaigns have been run well that are more suited to running to auction. And I think that really comes down to a couple of key questions that need to be answered. I think at least after 7 to 14 days of running the first week or two of the marketing period, that's really identifying, do we have enough buyers or do we have interest to run this to auction? Is my vendor in the right headspace to accept an offer right now or not? So does my owner want X, but the buyers are at Y and the gap's too big right now? The property may not be worth what the owner wants, and the buyers may not be willing to pay what the property needs, what it needs to be. So it's not the right time to try and close the gap here and try and get this deal done. So the answer to that question is we need to be running at least another week or two before we determine whether we, again, are going to sell prior and the day before the auction, or if we need to run to auction. If there's significant interest in the property, my attitude is you should be running that to auction, because you need to identify the best price for this property. And the best price for the property is usually found under competition. Or another question that you might ask yourself is, hey, do I have a standout buyer? Has this buyer been in the market for the last 12 months? Have they missed out on 2-3 properties? They're the best buyer for this property, and there's not a lot of competition behind them. And by actually extracting an offer out of this buyer after the first week of being on the market could well be the best thing for the owner. And I say that because that buyer has been in the market for a long time. They've missed out on properties. Doesn't matter the fact that the property's been on the market for 1 day or 3 days or 7 days. It's how long the buyer's been in the market for that really matters. So in that instance, the right decision might be selling prior in the first week of the campaign. So I think every property the decision to sell prior needs to be made based on each individual property, each buyer. And it really is up to the agent's advice at that point. And the owner needs to trust the agent, because they're the one that they've entrusted to sell their most prized asset. And this comes back to agent selection. Like, choose the agent you feel is going to best represent you, not just sell your home. The agent's not there to sell your property. They're there to get a premium price. I'm not there to conduct an auction for you and just get any price. I'm there to get the best price in the market from the buyers who are at the auction. Or if I can't sell that property on auction day, my role as the auctioneer is to make it more saleable post-auction. So I want to try and help that owner and the agent, frankly, get the right result for the owner in the weeks or days post-auction, and also help the buyers understand where they need to be. Some buyers need to go through the auction process to understand where they need to be on price. Some owners need to go through that auction process. Some owners need to go to auction and need to see no one register, and they need to see the property passed in without a bid to understand that their inflated price that they want for their home is actually not achievable. Now, I'm yet to meet a vendor that wants to give their property away as cheaply as they possibly can. I tell a lie, I have met someone who did give their property to charity, but I haven't met anyone that wants to undersell their home. I haven't met a buyer that wants to pay too much. Again, I come back to the agent's role is to bring both people together and then ultimately get the best result for the owner.
So you speak about, obviously, I guess, sellers who are hesitant to go to auction. You see a lot of sellers that might go down the track of doing something along the lines of forthcoming auction, along the lines of perhaps auction if not sold prior. In your opinion, is that something which then totally removes the urgency from the campaign and I guess sort of gives the game away, doesn't it?
Forthcoming auction is just a fancy way of trying to get buyers to make a decision faster. Auction without a date and at a time is not an auction. That's, again, another fancy way of marketing to try and create urgency for a buyer to make a decision. I just feel that anything other than auction on this date at this time, really all you're doing is you're weakening the process. You're weakening your stance. The agent has already given in that this really isn't an auction, and there's no commitment to running to auction day. I think that you need to, from a vendor's point of view, you need to go to the market with an auction date, with an auction time, and your focus needs to be on, we're going to auction. And the fact that, unless otherwise sold prior, like saying things like that, all that's really doing is trying to, I think agents write that on marketing campaign to either A, tell a buyer that, hey, we're going to auction, but we're not really, but, if you want to make an offer, you can. That's one thing. And the other thing is maybe to cover themselves if it does sell prior. I just believe that if you're going to auction your property, your focus should be, we're going to auction this property. And if you don't want us to auction the property, you're going to have to make a good offer, or circumstances are going to have to be in our favour to want to make a decision to either sell it before or not run it to auction.
Like, we're going to auction, change our mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I think buyers, like, if you want to attract a serious buyer, you need to be a serious seller. So that means having that marketing investment, having the auctioneer booked, so that it's not just a thought that may happen if a buyer doesn't come along within that period of time.
I'm really passionate about this because I truly believe that auction is the best way to sell real estate. I've only ever sold 2 properties. Both of them have been by auction. Incidentally, one was on a Friday night at 7 p.m. and the other was on a Monday night at 5 p.m. So for the record, for the vendors who are out there who need to have their auction on Saturday at 11 a.m. when the sun's in the right spot, it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. If you advertise a property for auction and a buyer's interested, buyers will turn up. Makes no difference whatsoever. I truly believe that it's the best way to sell real estate. And I believe that it's just a marketing strategy that gets the best result out of a buyer in the most timely manner. We categorically know that auctions sell in a much shorter time span than what any other method of sale. So if we can prove that by reducing the amount of days that your property sits on the market for actually gets you a better result, why would you not want to use auction? If we can prove that by auctioning opens your property up to a broader market, why would you not want to auction? If we can prove that by having a broader marketing strategy in a shorter period of time will generate more interest, create more urgency, and give buyers more transparency to purchase real estate, why would you not want to auction?
Yeah, 100%.
And I think it comes back to what you said initially, Matt, which is education and just being uncertain about everything. And that's one of the things which we're really trying to do is, I guess, give people more information to make more empowered decisions. Because as you say, Damo, if you knew all the information, it just seems insane that you wouldn't do it. But I think we take for granted as agents and auctioneers that everybody knows that information.
This comes back to fear. Comes back to a fear of not getting my price. Comes back to a fear of investing that money in marketing and not the perceived failure of not getting a result. But what a lot of people don't understand is that auction is a 3-phase selling system where you've actually got 3 chances of doing a deal and selling your property. You know what? If you've got good buyer interest or you've got a standout buyer, sell it before the auction. If you've got good interest and you want to run it to auction, run it to auction. Sell it at auction day. If both of those options don't work, you've made it more saleable by the time you get to auction. So you've actually condensed your marketing period a lot faster, and then it's more saleable post-auction. You can sell it in the days or the weeks after the auction date. The big thing that from an owner's point of view is that the owner is in control every single step of the way. I think owners feel like they're not in control, but they actually are more in control in an auction campaign. One, they're protected by their reserve price. And as I said before, the only person that can make a decision to say yes to an offer, the only person that can make a decision to say yes to an offer on a property is the owner. And if they want to sell the property, they can sell it. And if they want to say no, they just say no.
Yeah. It's such a big difference, though, I think, from that mentality, just shifting away from private treaty and knowing that, auction offers are something that you can do. It's opening up just a different buyer that you're attracting to. I've always found that there's some buyers that we deal with who predominantly would prefer to come and be at auction and know that the seller's serious as opposed to that for sale method. So I think hopefully by educating a few more people around the process, they might look to, find out a little bit more about it and maybe actually take auction as a method.
Yeah, and I think from a buyer's point of view, make the buyer help the buyer feel comfortable about turning up to the auction and bidding. Do things that will actually enable them to bid. Help them with any extra terms that they need associated with bidding. Maybe a reduced deposit, might even be $1,000 on auction day, and the $10,000 paid on the Monday and the balance paid X days after that. Like, think about different strategies. Do we need to give a buyer extended settlement? Do we need to give the buyer access to a panel of 3 or 4 lenders that can try and help them with finance approval? Do we need to help them by giving them building and pest inspections, strata reports? Do we need to have a panel of solicitors that will review a contract free of charge? Do we need to give them a price guide on the property? Like, think outside the square and actually help people buy real estate. Help buyers make the decision to make it easier for them to turn up and bid at auction without it costing them money, and help people. I think that's like one thing our industry needs to do more of. I think we do it really well, but I think we need to do more of is actually our role is actually help people buy and sell real estate. It's not about us. It's not about the agent. It's not about the auctioneer. It's about helping this person change their life by buying the right property that they want for their family or their investment, and helping this person who's selling move out of this home and onto the next stage of their life, and making that as an enjoyable process, as an enjoyable process as it possibly can. Not every property has a happy ending, really, at the end of the day. Some properties don't get the price that owner wants. Some buyers end up paying more, but to do it in a respectful way is absolutely critical.
Well, I think that's some really good tips there for anyone looking to buy, of course, anyone looking to sell, and also just some great advice, Damo, around mindset and the way people might look at auctions.
Oh, no question. Keep an open mind. Auction isn't a big scary thing. It's actually it's in your favour sometimes to go to auction from a buyer's point of view. Very, very transparent, and I always believe the best way to sell real estate.
Speaking of mindset, how was the auctioneer that had to do the auction for you? I can imagine that would have been a bit nerve-wracking.
Well, one of them I actually did, so I don't tell too many people that. So I must admit I did an amazing job at that one. No, that was good. That was good. And my brother Andrew did the auction on my one. Now, needless to say, he was very nervous before that. He did a great job. Look, at the end of the day, buyers go to auctions with an amount of money that they want to spend, and hopefully there's some flexibility with that. Really, the person who has the biggest budget should be the buyer. From an auctioneer's point of view, I think that the moment you're not a little bit edgy before an auction is the moment you probably should give it away. Even I get a little bit edgy before auctions, and I call thousands every year. I think that's the excitement of the unknown, the excitement of what's about to happen. So
that's a huge tip, though, for buyers who, how many times have you spoken to a buyer who says, I'm just not comfortable bidding on the day? You're not the only one who's uncomfortable. The auctioneer's uncomfortable, the owner's uncomfortable, the agent's uncomfortable.
I get uncomfortable bidding at auction. When people ask me to go and bid for them at an auction, I bid for Andrew, my brother, recently. I was nervous. Yeah. If I wore a heart rate monitor, I think it would have been bouncing all over the place. That's a good thing. Yeah. You're on your toes, you're excited, you're passionate about the property that you want to buy. And I think we're so fortunate we're in this amazing industry that we're able to be so passionate about it. And it's a really exciting industry to be part of.
Yeah, 100%. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. And Damien, thanks very much for taking your time out to do this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks a lot.
Guys.
Cheers.